So how do you know you're an intermediate drummer? It's really important to figure out where you're at so you know what to actually work on next. Figure out what path to go down to get the best results in the quickest way. But to get started, I want to take you around the office and talk to all the different drummers here at Drumeo. We're going to ask them what skill level drummer they are and see if they can self-assess themselves in the really, really honest way. Let's go. See, you just got to go in really fast. Hey.
What is up?
How do you, what skill level of drummer are you? I mean, I know the answer, but...
Like as out of a 1 to 10 in terms of...
Yeah, or a beginner, intermediate, advanced.
Oh. I'd say I'm a high intermediate.
High intermediate? Why?
Well, I mean, I can't do some advanced stuff, but I can play a lot of grooves, different styles. I can play with musicians, I can play in time.
Yeah.
I understand technique and the rudiments.
Yeah.
I know how to read sheet music.
I'm, I'd say level 2.
Level
2.
Like,
Lots to learn.
So you're, of 10, you're level 2.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Mm. Why would you say that?
Because, Jared, you see, you could be a rock drummer
And suck at Afro-Cuban.
I would say I'm an advanced with a lot of intermediate leanings.
So what makes you advanced?
I have a wide breadth of knowledge in a lot of different styles and contexts.
There you go.
That's pretty good. So you think it's based on the genres?
I think it's very style-based, and let's go with a 2 today.
A 2?
Two today.
You're saying 2. What level are you?
What level am I?
Yeah.
About 2 foot. Oh, you mean?
No, what skill level?
I would say high intermediate.
High intermediate? Why?
Yeah. Because I'm never going to reach the advanced level.
Never?
Never.
So you're forever a beginner?
I'm forever a beginner.
Or
I'm a student of the drums.
Yeah.
If people want to call me advanced, that's great. But you know me. I'm
Yeah.
kind of modest that way.
But, I mean, I think about advanced drummers like Todd Zuckerman, Benny Grab. I'm nowhere near those guys, so I would call those guys advanced.
Right.
And there's a big tier of intermediate.
Right.
What would you call yourself?
This isn't about that, Dave. So that was really interesting to talk to a few drummers around the office here and figure out what skill level everyone thinks they're at, because it is important when you're trying to find the places that you want to invest in when it comes to your education. So now I'm going to get into some tips that I've kind of compiled about how to actually tell if you're an intermediate drummer. So let's get into these. Right now, Dylan can put the camera down and I can stare at this one over here. So how do you know what skill level of drummer you are? Now, we recently launched the Drumeo method, and this is not a promotion about that at all, but a lot of students were saying, where do I start within the method? I've been playing for this amount of time, so where do I start? And it really has nothing to do with how long you've been playing. And it really has more to do with the skills you've developed as well as the knowledge that you've acquired. So I really want to try and help you self-assess where you're at. So if you do come to learn at Drumeo, or if you purchase a book, if you want to go study with a private teacher, or if you want to start watching different YouTube videos and figure out where you're at, this will really help you figure out where to spend your time. And it is important to self-assess and be honest with yourself. Where are you at within your drumming, as well as where do you want to go? So the first thing that I would say to figure out if you're an intermediate drummer is you can confidently improvise with other people. Now, this cannot be taught in a classroom or a video. You actually need to get out or invite people over and jam with other musicians. You actually need to improvise. You can build skills and tools to make this easier, but you really need the real world experience. Now, in Drumeo, we do something called Simon Says practice, and this is something where we'll play a pattern and you'll have to play it back right after us. So it forces you to listen and then react. You can also do this with a drummer buddy friend, and you could get them to play something and then you can react. And you can get them to play something else and you could react in a different way from it. You can really just figure out how to improvise. So you can improvise with other drummers, you can improvise with any other musicians, guitar players, piano players. So I'd really encourage you to get out there, play with other musicians. It's so important for your development, and there really is no way to get better at learning the drums than getting out there and playing with other people. The next thing I'll say is that you can learn new top 40 songs or new pop songs relatively quickly. So the groove comes naturally, you can listen, you can identify, you can play along, the simple stuff, not the crazy stuff. So whether you like top 40 songs or not, I guess the point of this is that you're actually comfortable listening to a relatively easy song, being able to figure out the beat create your own version in the style of the original. You have to know the form, be able to transition from the verse and the chorus, understand the dynamic shifts that are happening, and really kind of get a feel for what that drummer did on the recording. Because as an intermediate drummer, you're going to be playing with more bands. If you can improvise confidently with other people, you're probably going to be asked to play gigs, whether that be in church, whether that be in a jam band, whether that be a wedding band. It could be anything, but it's really, really fun experience to go out and play music with other people. And if you play top 40 music, it's kind of a nice blueprint where everyone can just say, yeah, we're playing that song, and everyone knows exactly what to learn. The next thing is that you have a solid understanding of basic drum techniques. So, what basic drum techniques do you need to know? The first thing is ghost notes. Now, a lot of beginner drummers, when they play ghost notes, they'll play like this. Whereas the ghost notes should sound much, much different. Your dynamic range is much greater. I find that a lot of beginners, they're able to play from here to maybe here in their dynamic range. Intermediates, the dynamic range is wider, and advanced guys like Benny Greb level, they're able to just like the contrast in what they can play is incredible. So that's what we aspire to is our favorite drummers, right? Now the next thing is accurate rim shots. Now this is one thing I struggled with a lot, and I still do from time to time. So much has to do with how my snare drum is set up. Now when I'm talking about rim shots, I'm not talking about cross stick. I'm talking about rim shots where your stick hits the rim on the stick right here, as well as the tip, and they hit at the same time. And a lot of times you'll hear beginner drummers, and they'll be playing a backbeat, and you hear a lot of inconsistency. And when you're playing pop songs or top 40, you really want a nice and consistent backbeat. So accurate rim shots are really important. The next thing I would say is the motions. Now this is something that I was so happy I learned probably around 2 years into my drumming. Now the motions are full strokes, tap strokes, up strokes, down strokes. They're based off of the molar method, and whether you, I've heard people saying they don't like to consider things molar before. Regardless of that, there's this movement that happens when we play drums, and we can utilize this movement, we can utilize the rebound to create better sounding fills, better sounding grooves, and really improve our timing. That's one thing that I think is underrated with the motions is if I'm doing this on the hi-hat, it's creating this motion, but that's also helping me to ensure the timing is right. Whereas if I was trying to do this just like here, from the wrist, the motion is very different and it's not as fluid. Something I'm still always working on improving is really to get the fluidity going around the kit. One guy that has great motions around the kit is Dave Weckl. He's done a really good job of breaking down his technique, and the music just oozes from him. It sounds so good. The next thing I would say intermediate drummers know when it comes to techniques is dynamic limb independence. And this is something we talk about a lot on Drumeo because it is so important. And essentially what dynamic limb independence is, you're able to dynamically change the volume of your right hand, your left hand, your right foot, or your left foot, independently of anything else that is happening. So you'll see a lot of new drummers, they can only play things at the same volume, with the same velocity, with even the same timing. So you'll see a lot of new drummers go like this, because their right hand follows their right foot. So that's basic independence. What we need to do is we need to get this to do its own pattern, but then we also need to be able to control the dynamics of that pattern independently. So instead of the groove sounding like this, we can get a nice sounding rock groove or jazz groove or whatever style, and it can sound like it actually fits within that style. So in this case, I would make the hi-hat quieter. As opposed to, in some cases, you want to change it. You want the snare drum to be quieter. Let's say you're playing some jazz. Now, I'm by no means a jazz aficionado or anything like that, but I love listening to it, I love playing it, and what you need to do with your limbs dynamically is different within that style. So really think about that when you're playing. Are you locked into a certain snare volume just because it's a habit and you can't change it? Or can you actually, like on a mixing board, say, I want the snare to be quieter, I want the bass drum to be louder, I want the hi-hats to be quieter. And then the next song, say, I want the hi-hats to be louder, I want the snare to be quieter, and I want the bass drum to be louder. You need to figure out if you can do that and actually practice it. It's much more difficult than you'd think, especially with some of the grooves that you're playing. More of the new grooves as opposed to the grooves that you have been playing for a long time. Now the next thing is that you can play with a metronome with confidence. You can do this when you're playing live with a band, or you could do it in your practice. Now you also have a good internal clock, and you're not always rushing the beat. So when you talk about internal clock is just when I play the drums, it's not going to be perfect. Unless I'm playing with a metronome, the timing is not going to be perfect. No matter how good my timing is, if I play the drums with no metronome over a 1 minute span, where I start and where I end is likely going to be different. It could be the same, but within there, you're going to see fluctuations within the time. Now this is my internal clock. And if the internal clock is way out of whack, when I'm playing with a band and I'm getting excited or I'm doing a fill, I'm going to rush the beat a lot. This was a huge struggle of mine, and I've really tried to do a better job of my timing throughout the years, and so it's still obviously something I'm working on. And the more accurate your internal clock is, the better. That doesn't mean you don't kind of pull back and push the groove. I actually prefer the gigs where there's no metronome live, and I prefer sometimes feeling like I'm going to speed it up a couple beats per minute, I'm going to pull it back a couple beats per minute. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. How music is so heavily quantized today, and it all has to be perfect, it all has to be locked into the grid, isn't something that I necessarily like or want to really be a part of. I don't necessarily want to be in a band like that where they're quantizing everything and locking it to a grid and making my kit, my sound like robotic as opposed to sound like what I actually played, whereas this human and organic element to it. Now that aside, that's my opinion, right? And you can take it for what it's worth. But when we talk about metronomic clock, now this is like an exact time. If you've checked out Gavin Harrison's lessons on Drumeo, I'd really encourage you to do that because he goes into much more depth about this, and he's an incredible drummer, and he's very deep philosophical thinker when it comes to some of these concepts. So one thing I did to really help my internal clock is something I learned from Benny Greb, and I saw Mike Michalkow do it, and that is using an offset click. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in my headphones, I'm going to show you what this means. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play to the metronome at 70 beats per minute, but I'm not going to play right on the beat. I'm going to put the metronome click as the end of each note. So I'll be going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and the metronome will be going 1 and it's going to sound different than you're used to hearing. And if you haven't tried this, I highly recommend you do, because a lot of us are way too locked into the metronome in that we can't even play around it. We have no freedom within it, and that's why the drumming sounds so robotic, at least for me. So when I put the metronome on an offset click, either on the ands, the e's, the ahs, I find that I get a much more unique feel, and I think about what I'm playing differently. So listen to the metronome. So what I do to start this, I'll just count the ands. And 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4 and 1. So that's the first thing I do. The next thing I'll do is I'll start putting on the E's and the ahs. And the way I do this is I essentially will play one bar or as many bars as I want, straight time, and then I'll play one bar of 15/16. It's essentially just knocking off a 16th note, so it's not actually that difficult. But just listen to how that sounds and how the metronome shifts within the bar from going on quarter notes on the downbeats to then the E's, to then the ands, and then the ah. Here we go. Something that I'm consistently working on. If you want to check out a great lesson on this, check out Benny Greb's lesson on Drumeo, and also check out Mike Michalkow's lesson. He does an offset click at 30 beats per minute using triplets. It'll blow your mind. So check it out if you're looking for some inspiration there, and some guys who have really worked on developing their internal clock. And it's almost like they control the metronome. The metronome is not controlling them. It's really, really fun to watch. The next thing is that you understand how important it is to serve the song and not yourself. Now for me, it's kind of interesting when I play along to songs here on Drumeo. Now when I play on Drumeo, I know that it's majority of drummers that are going to be watching me, and I need to show them things that they enjoy watching, things that entertain them but also educate them. So in some cases, we do play a lot. We probably play too much for the songs, but we are trying to serve our audience in the same way. Now, when you're playing for a band and you're at a gig and there's a very diverse group of people, maybe none of which are drummers, they don't care about all your crazy fills. They don't care at all. What they're listening to likely is the singer, the melody, they're trying to sing along, and all of your crazy fills that are serving you are not really welcome there. So I'd really encourage you to pull back in those types of instances and really think about the band as one unit and one sound. And when you are playing just for a specific group of people, like just drummers, yeah, you can turn it up a little bit, but still be cautious about how much you do that. An intermediate drummer is not at that level because they can play fast and because they can do tons of gospel chops. Technical and vocabulary development is important, but it is more important to be able to hear a song and add your unique voice in a musically mature way. So focus on doing that. Now, the next way you know if you're an intermediate drummer is you realize that the more you know, the more you don't know. And you always maintain a mindset of a beginner. That's what we were talking about with Mike in the beginning of this video. You always have a beginner's mindset, and it's crazy how I've been playing for 20 years and I do feel like I have way more to learn now, 20 years plus later, than I did 3 years in when I was maybe like a little bit cocky 17-year-old that thought he knows everything. And so it's like we even spoke to Brandon and he said he was a level 2 drummer because he's maybe higher at rock but really low at jazz. And so when he averages himself out in comparison to the big scale that he clearly knows, he's got a music degree, and he publishes all of our books here, and so he's really into the pedagogy of music. He understands how much he has to learn, and that's why he said he's level 2. But if you ever heard him play, you know that he's an absolutely phenomenal drummer. So don't be cocky and think that you can't learn anything else or you can't learn from someone. We can all learn something from everyone. We need to keep an open mindset and stay humble. That's how you really know if you're an intermediate drummer, and I think most of us are intermediate drummers. I would consider myself an intermediate drummer who's still really studying and trying to get better. We have the super high level guys that we look to as advanced, but I don't necessarily look at myself in that way. But everyone's a little bit different. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's been a blast really thinking about this, diving into it, talking with so many of you about it before this lesson, and I'm really happy that I got to do this. So thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next lesson.